Hi everyone, Mike Holmes here, and welcome back to another episode of Holmes on Holmes, the podcast. Today we're going to be talking to Mike from Kinetico and Dan from Elgin Pure Waters. We're going to learn everything about water. Also, we're going to be doing a water test first, all about my well, what we need to do, how we need to size it, am I good, am I bad? We'll be right back after this. All right, so I brought in some water from my well. Obviously, I put in a new well. We're testing it. We've tested it a few times already, and right now, this is 2 weeks in. We are just going to see through this machine, and this is the hardness meters. That's hardness, TDS.
TDS, correct.
Okay, so what the hell? Let's just do this.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Okay, we'll get started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, this is a spin tester. So what this does is analyzes the water in real time, spits it out into a digital reading that we can analyze and get an idea of the numbers.
What's in the water.
Right, so that we're able to properly size your equipment. So this is water that you've brought in. What I'm going to do is just slowly fill a disc here.
So much like blood, this thing spins, like
Yep.
I've seen, because what you're trying to do is figure out what the hell's in the water.
Correct. So it will analyze the water, and like I said, give us some numbers that we can compare and look at to properly size the equipment for your home.
What we're trying to do here is to determine for my house, the new well, what type of softener, how big, etc., depending on TDS, which we're going to talk about in detail, which is total dissolved salts, what that number is, how to break it down, and how to make the water pretty as healthy as I can in my home.
Improve it, yeah, improve the quality for you, for your health, and for the house as well.
Yeah, only at Improve Canada. We're trying to improve my water.
Okay, so there you go. So what it's doing is just spinning it around. The water's being forced onto the outsides of the disc. They will come out into a specific color that the machine analyzes, and then will give us a digital readout for us.
How long does this take?
This is a couple of minutes at the most. So
Until it's ready.
Until it's ready. In fact, yeah, it'll do this a couple of times, and then it'll stop, and the screen will change for you.
Okay, and at the same time, we're going to take the TDS meter.
We can do that in the meantime, actually.
Which is going to tell us the total number of TDS.
Yeah,
total dissolved
total
solids.
dissolved solids. So basically
Solids.
And it's basically a measure of all of the mineral and such that the water has dissolved on its way to your well.
See, I said salts, total dissolved salts, but it's solids.
Total dissolved solids, yeah.
But it's in essence, it's salt. Is that right?
Well, it's probably
Salt
made
can
up
be-
of calcium, magnesium. In wells, that's where a lot of the hardness comes from. This machine will give us a hardness reading on. And it can
Okay.
also be anything else that may be in your water that you can't see, taste, or smell. And that'll also be what, that machine will indicate to us, so that we'll know, as Dan said, what equipment you need
So
to
it's-
resolve what's in your water.
It's lower.
It is a little bit lower from the last time, and yours has fluctuated a little bit, new well and such.
And we're going to talk about that.
Correct. So it's sitting at about 810 parts per million.
So 810 parts per million on TDS, which is total dissolved solids. That's a high number, yes?
It is. So let's give you a comparison. So we live around the Great Lakes around here. Standard lake water, depending on proximity and such, you're in and around about 180 parts per million, depending on the lake and such. So lake water is a little bit lower on the dissolved solids, mainly because the hardness is lower. So what this will help us do is figure out what a large portion of that TDS is comprised of.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
All right, so we'll do a quick reading here, and then we'll turn that back over.
Which is a whole other subject about lakes, and I want to get into that later. How good is that water? It may be low in TDS, but it could have other problems with it.
As it's under the influence of runoff.
Which becomes city water.
Correct. So, so the readings on here for yours, we came out with a pH of 7.7, alkalinity 102, hardness, you're down to 29 grains, and that's fluctuated a little bit.
Holy cow, that was at 60 something at the beginning, and now it's
Right
down.
at the beginning.
So it's down to a controllable number.
Yep.
For water softening.
Much more controllable, yes.
Okay, so our TDS is at 810 parts per million. What about the pH? What number does that mean?
So pH is 7.7. That's a good number. So the pH is the measure of the acidity or alkalinity of your water. And the reason that's important is we want to make sure that the water is not going to be corrosive. If the pH is very low, then we would want to neutralize the water by raising that pH back up. Neutral pH is 7, and at 7.7, that is actually a pretty good pH number. It gives a little bit of alkalinity to the water. It's going to help with reducing corrosion from high alkalinity, from acidic water. So 7.7 it will help us make sure that the pipes don't corrode and things like that.
Okay, years ago I heard this theory about using a copper jug. And with that copper jug, you're going to take your tap water, it's going to sit in the copper jug, you put it in the fridge, you take it out, you drink it. And the copper is supposed to add alkalinity to the water. How correct is that?
I've never heard that one before.
Really?
Not a common
This
one.
was done in thousands of years ago.
I think I've heard something about copper provides a certain level of sterility to the water as it runs through the pipes, but as far as raising alkalinity, that would only be if some of the copper were to come off due to acidity, and it would then bring the copper into the water because it would be slightly aggressive, right?
Okay, so that's another subject we're going to have to learn about. But I pay attention to things. And
Interesting.
It's like, is this real? Like we're trying to raise the level of alkaline in the water for our own health? What happens if there's too much?
Too much alkalinity can cause another issue altogether. It can throw off tastes, it can throw off odors, and aggressive water as well. So high alkalinity can also stage for aggressive water.
Everything is about balance is what I'm seeing. It's
Correct.
totally about balance. Okay, so any bad news?
Actually, this one's looking pretty good. So earlier we tested for iron, and actually we had a minimal amount of, I think the one we had was 0.3,
Yep.
Your total iron right now is down to 0.
Zero. So I don't need an iron filter, which is a good thing. An iron filter is going to require 5 gallons per minute to flush, correct?
Most at a bare minimum will require a certain flow rate, and we were dancing around that flow rate at your place. So we were hoping to try to make sure that the flow rate was enough that the softener would operate and the house was sufficient. But obviously with a lower flow rate, it makes things like iron removers harder to
Okay,
operate.
so I think we should sit back down and we are going to go into detail over this so I can teach you, you can teach me, because the things that I've learned in the last couple of months, I'm maybe a little nervous, just a little nervous. Come on over here.
Sounds good. Great.
So I just want to go back just a bit to the point of when and why I drilled a new well at my home. As I'm showering all the time, I can feel how hard the water is. And I don't know if people notice this. When the water's really hard, it's like there's no soap on your body. And then when the water's soft, it's like the soap never comes off. But the difference really is for women would be nice soft hair or hard hair and how it feels. And it wasn't just that, it's because I was tired of actually trying to use CLR to clean my aerators on all my faucets, and it's just plugging up my system. Not too long ago, I replaced the laundry sink, and as I pulled out the drain, I found inside the pipe itself, which looked like hard porcelain, and this is the TDS buildup within my house. Hence, the new well is drilled. After I drilled the new well, we came up at a level of how much in TDS?
Initially off the first test, I think we were well up over 1,000. If I'm not mistaken, we were
1,500.
Right.
And that's a huge number. As soon as I heard that number, I knew I was in trouble, and we discussed a whole house RO, reverse osmosis. We're going to get into that too. Which, in a way, is the worry is, do I have enough room to put in a holding tank to treat that water? The maintenance levels become high and costly through the year, rather than just having well water, but a couple of water softeners. When I say that, it's 2 tanks and a salt barrel.
Right.
And I want to get into more of that. Since that 2 weeks ago, that the well has now been hooked up to my house, we're at a level of about 800. It has dropped down in the TDS and much cleaner in iron 0. Copper, I think, was 0.
Yep.
Everything else seemed to be good. So we're looking at a much safer zone for me when it comes to more money and maintenance and easier to control the water in my home to make it healthy, correct?
Correct.
Okay. From these numbers now, you're going to size up what I need when it comes to the 2 tanks. So before I get into that and we talk about it, what are those 2 tanks and the salt container so people understand it?
So inside of the twin tanks that are joined together is a product called resin. Resin is kind of like a magnet for hardness. So it attracts calcium and magnesium and releases the sodium and chloride back into the water, which is the salt in the brine tank. That resin has a capacity to remove so much hardness based upon how much you have in your water and how much resin is in the tank. We put the softener to a setting based upon your hardness. The system will soften for a certain amount of time, and then after that gallonage has been used up, the system will go into what's called a regeneration. That's where the salt comes in. Salt is used to allow the resin to release the sodium, the calcium and magnesium, and grab a hold of sodium and chloride, which regenerates or makes the resin ready for another cycle of so many days or so many gallons.
So I don't know about you, but this sounds very confusing to me. I can only imagine it's very confusing for you. Here's what I'm getting. This is not a do-it-yourself thing for the water in your home. You can't just go to the big box store and buy yourself a water softener, bring it home, although it's probably going to help you if you're on well water or hard water for that matter, hook it up and expect it to work the way it's supposed to. What I'm getting from you guys is that we need to test the water to determine what you need to bring in to create the proper performance in my home for healthy, for lower levels of TDS, lower levels of hard water. And speaking of that, what is the perfect number for hard water in your home? I know that Georgetown is in the area of 14 grains of hard water. I know that Lake Ontario in downtown Toronto is what, 7?
Correct.
Okay, so 7, and that's based on hardness in the water, and it's going to be different everywhere from the United States or around the world. They're all going to be different. What we need to learn is what we need to do to control it and make sure that our water is clean. Here's something I do know. When I bought my first house up north with a well, with a septic tank, all the laws really cared about in buying that house was to check for bacteria in the well, gallons per minute, and recovery rate, meaning you probably have 3 gallons per minute, 5 gallons per minute, maybe 1.5 gallons that the well can produce. And as you use that water, the water will go down, whether it's a dug well or whether it's a drilled well for that matter. How long does it take to recover? This is what real estate companies, lawyers want to see when it comes to buying a house with well, correct?
Actually, with how the laws are, I think one of the major things they're looking at is bacterial analysis before the client takes possession. As far as flow rate and things like that, this is why we're here. We want to talk about the importance of doing a flow rate sample, having an inspector or a water professional come in to test the water and to look at the well, have a well record report or a well driller do a well recovery test to make sure that there is enough water coming back into the well to satisfy the home. And then that's where we come in for water testing to ensure that the quality of water is there. And if not, then we can help suggest some solutions for that customer.
So the biggest thing that I'm hearing out of that is bacteria in the water. That's what they want to know.
Potability, making sure that the water is safe.
Okay, but I've heard stories that when people are selling their houses, they take a gallon of bleach and pour it down the well, and I've heard these stories, whether or not they're true or not. That will clean up the water coming in for a certain period of time.
It could. It would only clean up the water if the bacterial contamination was actually into the well itself or into the water lines. If the bacterial contamination is coming from the aquifer or the ground source, simply chlorinating the well is not going to solve the problem long term. That's going to be a short-term solution. Hopefully that doesn't happen too often, but if that's a short-term solution to try to get a test for the real estate, then so be it. Sometimes that becomes a temporary solution to rule out that it is just lines or well, and to rule back in that it is the aquifer, and then from there we can suggest a system to treat for bacteria. Okay,
so let's talk about that. The aquifer, when we do a drill into the ground, because we're doing a drilled well, we usually have a couple rows of aquifer. One may be 60 feet, the next one down 100, depending on your area. So we usually get to go through a couple of aquifers. What we're trying to do is find the one aquifer at my house that's going to give you the amount of gallons per minute that we would need. The great thing, even though I only came up with about 3.5 gallons per hour, is that
Gallons per minute.
it's per minute.
Per minute, correct.
yeah.
Correct. So I only came up with about 3.5 gallons per minute on my property. I was afraid of that. I thought it was going to be an issue. It's not really an issue. Some people only get 1.5 gallons per minute. Also, there's 100 gallons per minute. You know, they're drilled into it's a gusher. Like, you know, what was the old show? The Green Acres. Which one was that? Really?
Like the Beverly Hillbillies?
Beverly Hillbillies.
Beverly Hillbillies.
There we go.
The old show is the Beverly Hillbillies, where they hit on their property an oil well and it gushed out. That's what we're all looking for when we're doing a drilled well. A dug well, it's what I used to have, is about 36 inches wide. It's a round cylinder, about 25, 30 feet in the ground. That acts as a cistern tank, or holding tanks for you to understand. It allows the water to actually seep into the well. That would be down beneath grade, and it keeps me with a cistern tank. The problem with that is I could have hard water at farms around me. I could have water runoff, and possibly this is where the contamination could be a problem. Thank God I've never had that problem. But I got to tell you the story. 2 weeks later, we find we're at about 800 TDS. I keep saying total dissolved salts. It's not. It's total dissolved solids. With this, it's now at a controllable level. It looks like my water's good. It looks like I have enough gallons per minute. I think we're going to cap it off at 4 gallons. In other words, put a restrictor on it so it'll never pass 4 gallons per minute and drain that drilled well down to the pump, which is not what we want to do. At 100 feet down is where the pump is. I've got a pretty good run cycle with recovery rate, so it should balance out. It's not like I'm going to run all the taps in the house at once. There's only 2 of us there, so it's going to work for what I need. So I'm feeling better now that Kinetico is going to come in. These 2 wonderful people are going to help me with what I need in my home, and I can reduce all that hardness. I can reduce all the TDSs in my home. But through all of this, what I'm learning is the importance for us to understand water. We just talked about what you have to do to buy a house that has a well, and we're not checking enough, are we? There's nothing in the system that says you got to check for radon gas. And there's nothing really in the system that says you really should look into the water. Everything I've learned right now is that anyone that wants to buy a house with well water really needs to call in the pros to test that water
100%.
Before you buy the home. Because once you buy the home, you're left holding the bag.
It's your responsibility.
And it's your bag, by the way.
And we talked about this this earlier place, and we're seeing a trend right now where that's becoming harder and harder for the consumer to do. We're seeing a trend in real estate where inspections are being waived, over purchasing or over dollar figures, and to get the deal, they're waiving all conditions. They're waiving home inspections, which for a rural property on a well where there is quality in question, that does put a lot of responsibility on your shoulders once you own the place if there is something wrong.
Agreed. So you've been in water all your life. Your family has been in water. It's a water
Correct.
company. Mike, you've been in water with Kinetico for many, many years.
8.5.
And because of that, you guys know about water. Just listen to this for a second. Every morning we wake up, we flick that switch to turn on the light, to go to the bathroom, to open the tap, to brush our teeth, probably because we have stale breath, get ready for the day, correct?
I do.
We don't know what's in the water. We don't know where the electricity comes from, whether it's clean, etc., that turns on that light bulb overhead so we can see, so we can brush our teeth. And these are things we need to know. Electricity, it's not going to come into our body other than EMFs, that's electrical magnetic fields. If there's too much of that, that can actually affect you, and it's another podcast. This one's all about water. I don't think we understand enough about water, and I think we really need to. We just learned that doing a test over here that bottled water has a high TDS level. Although it's not unhealthy for you, we want a lower TDS level.
That's just indicative of that particular source of water.
Okay. And
and if that was coming into your house, other than it going inside of you, that type of TDS, if it was coming through your home, could provide a lot of other issues to your home and your distribution system. That level will cake up your hot water tank like what you were experiencing
All
at your home.
aerators.
Right.
If
all
you
of
notice
those.
that you open your taps, the cold water and the hot water, they become harder to open and not nice and simple, and that's because of the high TDS levels.
Well, and a lot of it depends on the level of TDS keeping, or not the level, but what that TDS is
Made up
so
of.
TDS is a broad term used for all dissolved solids that the water, or all minerals that the water has dissolved on its way either to your aquifer or to your tap. So TDS could be a high level of calcium and magnesium, which in your case, the majority of your TDS is hardness. We have situations where we go to homes and we see high levels of TDS, but it's not hardness. It could be naturally occurring sodium. It could be a shallow well near a road. So the salts have run off, they've accumulated in the ground source, and now they're starting to fill the well with salt water.
Holy cow, I never thought of that. As
Right.
we're bringing plows to plow the snow, they're adding salt. Where I live, they're usually putting sand down. But there's a lot of neighborhoods that they're adding the salt. As that washes off and into the ditches, that's going to leach into the ground, not just run where it's supposed to go.
Correct.
It actually leaches into the ground.
Correct.
That can also add high TDS levels?
That would be unnaturally occurring. So naturally occurring would be part of the ground. Yours would be unnaturally occurring if it's coming off of the road and eventually leaching its way down into your well. More susceptible would be wells that are, 50 feet deep or less, because you are directly under the influence of of surface water, of surface contaminants. So, it depends on location of the well, it depends on the depth, and obviously the area. Like I said, that would be unnaturally occurring, but there are other naturally occurring minerals, sulfates, chlorides, things like that, that could contribute to that TDS that could be worse for your distribution. Hardness is going to scale up, and you're going to see your pipes starting to reduce their internal diameter. Other things like sodium, you might notice it initially in its taste, but sodium could really pose problems on the distribution and piping system for corrosion, and also all of your fixtures.
Okay, so we know when it rains, what happens is the clouds pulls up the water from the ground as it goes across the planet, and then it pours it back down again. We know that there's salt in rain, correct?
There's contaminants in rain.
Contaminants is a good way of saying
Airborne.
it. When it comes to construction, I can tell you that in the basement, I go in how many times and there's white on the cinder block and or a poured foundation wall. That's efflorescence. That's the salt in the water, whether it comes from the rain or the ground, that is driving in, because moisture wants to travel from wet to dry. Outside is wet in the ground, and it wants to travel through the concrete to the dry spot. That will give the signs of efflorescence. In essence, we're going to have the same thing in our wells, or the possibility of it.
It's called the hydrological cycle.
Hydrological cycle.
Right.
See, that's logical to me. Now, what wasn't logical to me, and I have to tell you, and it's what led me to want to do a drilled well. As I got older, I had a couple of heart problems. They're pretty much fixed now, and I'm feeling good about it, and I'm still going to be here for a while. I drank beer, right? There's 95% water in beer. I never really drank water, and from the health issues, I started eating healthier. I started drinking a lot more water. And it started to play into my head as I'm drinking water, and I would probably drink about 3 to 5 liters a day. I drink an awful lot of water. My intake of water, all of a sudden, in my logical thinking was, if I'm opening up the drains in my house and I'm seeing white porcelain stuck to the pipes that I got to break out and go, holy cow, it's causing clogs in my plumbing. It's causing leaks. It's causing problems. If I'm drinking that water, who says that water cannot clog my internal system? Am I right here, or is this a possibility?
Well, anything in your water has to be filtered out. There's an old saying that we use at Kinetico that says either buy a filter or be a filter. If you don't have filtration in your home, then you're the filter for your water, right? Your body is then filtering out any impurities that are in that water as it goes through you. A lot of our...
So the answer is yes.
Yes.
Okay. Here's the funny part, folks. This has really gotten on my nerves like crazy. They're plastering next door, which is great. You can hear the guy going. To me, it's music to the ears that someone's doing construction. Over the years, 15 years, I've lived in this wonderful property that I have, my own oasis. And I know about plumbing. I know about electrical. I know about problems. Through all of this, we determined, why is my bathroom upstairs, my bathroom, why is the toilet dirty afterwards? And it's because we lowered the pressure tank right down to zero, brought it back up. Over the years, the dirt from pulling from the well has settled in the bottom of the air pressure tank. Once we regenerated the system, in other words, turned the water back on, it filled my toilet with dirt, my tub with dirt, and I started paying attention to this, and there was no dirt downstairs in the kitchen, the downstairs bathroom, and I'm thinking, holy cow. 45 years ago, when the plumber did the plumbing at my house, they didn't really have water softeners. They may have had filters, which I'm going to assume. So the plumber, the line comes in under my stairs into the pressure tank, which then comes through into the utility room, which then is doing what it's supposed to do, go through the water softener to filter. In other words, the plumber put a direct line off the cold line intake to the house into my bathroom, which means for 15 years, I have been brushing my teeth right out of the well. I have been showering right out of the well before the filtration system and before the water softener. I wondered why it was so hard. I kept calling Hugh, my well guy. Why is my water so hard? It's what I'm feeling. Oh, Mike, your water's soft. You know, we've got it controlled by the water softener. But we got high TDS levels, which was really messing with my brain, because if the water's soft and I got high TDS levels and I'm still feeling the hardness, in other words, it didn't make sense until I actually figured out that I had a direct line to my bathroom. And now I'm going to gut my bathroom because I deserve a new bathroom, because I need that proper cold line going through the filtration system and the water softener. Hence, we solved another problem. But that brings me back to what I was saying, my mind, that I was drinking high levels of TDS, high levels of hard water, and could this affected my own health? Is the answer yes to that?
Definitely, and keep in mind with TDS, hard water makes up a certain part of that TDS, but a softener will not lower TDS. A softener will remove calcium and magnesium, but during the regen process, it puts sodium and chloride back into the water. So you still would have noticed the TDS being very similar. What you were noticing is the effects of the hard water. The raw water not being filtered, not having sediment removed before the softener, the sodium and the calcium and magnesium building up on your shower and in the back of your toilet and such. So,
speaking of the back of the toilet, this is a great information pack for those of you who are worried about iron in your water, and we're going to get into smells in a second. The number one spot to look is where water sits, and that's the
100%.
holding tank to your toilet. And if you find a lot of red in your holding tank, that means you have high levels of iron, correct?
Well, anything in the toilet. So the toilet is the only place in your home when you can literally look inside of your distribution system, right? Short of gutting your bathroom and cutting the pipes apart and doing this. For us as a company and for us as salespeople going into the home, it's a perfect example to look in and see what's in your water visually. One of the things is definitely iron. Iron's attributes are red staining, light orange staining, depending on its severity. Iron can build up on the inside of that tank. There's also different types of iron. So if there's a bacterial quality to the water, you may notice that you actually have a slime built up over top of
Which
on the
is
side.
worse.
Yes.
Which is a whole other ball game over iron. It's definitely a different method of treatment. It's a little more involved and may require something other than salt, like a softener. It may require some chemicals to be involved to help treat that water.
So a simple trick for everyone is just to pull the lid off the
Pull the
tank
lid.
of your toilet, take a look. If it doesn't look clean, you probably have a water problem and should have it checked,
Correct.
especially if you have kids. I mean, we worry about our kids, but don't seem to worry about ourselves. But
Well, any filtration equipment or anything that you had in your home prior to us coming in wasn't even your water for your particular washer, Mike, wasn't even going through that. So anything that was in that well that may or could have been in that well
Even bacteria.
was right. You were directly consuming when you brushed your teeth every day, when you showered every day, and a lot of people open their mouth in the shower. So yeah,
I was gargling with my shower.
you're fortunate in a way that you didn't have a terrible source from a bacterial perspective or from a, something of a pathogen. But, it could have definitely, been a lot worse.
E. coli.
Yeah.
Parasites. What else?
Coliform is another form of bacteria.
Who? Sorry?
Coliform.
Coliform?
Yep. Coliform is one of the tests that is included in a bacterial sample. So they test for coliform and E. coli. Coliform being an indicator bacteria can indicate that there could be an improper seal in the well, an improper cap, a leak and infiltration somewhere, or contamination within the aquifer itself. But it's an indication you should look further into your water source.
So let's speak about that for a second, because you just, again, my train of thought when it comes to the aquifer, my first initial feeling is that we've got clean water underground. And if it's 100, my well is 120 feet deep. That means Mother Nature, over years, takes a long time for that water to get down to the aquifer. The earth, the stone, etc., filters it naturally and gives you a clean aquifer, normally. But we're actually finding places around that are not clean in the aquifer. What could cause that?
It could be a number of things. We've spoken about hardness, we've spoken about iron. One of the other more common ones in this area, we see a lot of sulfur. We can see it in different pockets in and around our area of Ontario, and sulfur is another one that can be noticed by smell. It's usually a rotten egg odor we'll attribute to that. Sulfur also leaves dark staining behind. So again, if you're looking at your toilet, look for some black. It can indicate sulfur or even manganese. But the clear sign with sulfur is to aerate, turn your tap on, and when you spray water down into the sink, you'll notice that distinct rotten egg odor.
So if it smells,
Yeah,
you need it checked.
for sure.
If it's
Yes.
in the back of your toilet, if there's colors holding in your tank, you need it checked.
Well, and you're talking more from a health perspective. We haven't even talked about the aesthetic perspective as well. So things like iron are going to ruin your appliances. They'll build up on your pipes. Hair.
Destroy your
We've had-
clothing. You can't wash your clothes in your washing machine. You open the inside of somebody's dishwasher who it maybe isn't stainless steel, and it looks like, a bowl of pasta was washed in there last night because it's just caked with orange. There's a number of different things that can happen, and it'll affect your entire home.
Definitely. Within our area, we usually have the more common tests that we do, and all areas, water treatment dealers will have the common ones because they know their area that they work in. Those are the common ones we do. pH is a common test. We want to make sure, acidity, alkalinity, that we're not going to have corrosion problems. Hardness to indicate whether we need a softener in there or not. Obviously, we've talked TDS to ensure that the mineral isn't too high, and if it is, we talk about reverse osmosis for either whole home or for drinking, obviously for drinking. And then iron, sulfur, manganese. There's other ones. Tannins. Tannins is seen in water almost as if the water was a urine-looking color or yellowish, light yellowish color. A tannin can be brought into the water over time through the water sitting in decayed vegetation or organics down in the well. Almost like tea. When you make a cup of tea, you put the tea bag into the water, and what you're seeing is the tannins coming out of the bag and making that tea a color. That's exactly what can happen in a well or in an aquifer as well. And then we go into another different type of treatment for that.
Okay, so over this time period of me living up north, and I love it, and talking to the professionals, putting in a new well, I've learned so many things about what I need to know about water. What it possibly has done to me in the last 15 years, which probably hasn't been good. It just hasn't been. The one thing I don't think I got was a coli or parasites, or I got that when I went to Africa, etc. And don't want that. Trust me, this stuff will kill you. It's that I'm learning that we need to pay attention to water more than we ever thought in our lives. Even if your bottled water isn't high in TDS levels, we didn't know that. That's not a good thing. Let's for a moment step outside of the well and septic world of the rural areas and move down to the city water.
Yep.
I know for a fact we have problems with city water, and I'm just going to make this really simple. We have people all the way around Lake Ontario, United States, Canada, And that's an awful lot of people that drink that water, that when we go to the bathroom, all of us, it goes back into what is like a huge septic system. And these are water treatment plants, both all across Canada, Ontario, and United States. The water gets treated, gets pumped back out to the lake. And over the years, we have gone further and further for fresh water out to the middle of Lake Ontario. That water gets pulled back in again, it gets treated and goes to the condos, the houses, anything that we call city water. How clean is city water?
Well, city water's potable, right? That's what city water has to be. I mean, city water has to be potable. The term potable means that it's free of, it's safe and healthy to drink, and it's safe and healthy for food preparation. So you can open the tap safely, consume the water, and know that you aren't going to get sick. And that's really the mandate of what needs to be done. We can see, though, by looking around as we're traveling around our community, that for a lot of people, they've made a decision that that's not sufficient to them. We know that by the amount of people who carry their own vessels, that use an alternate source for drinking or purchase bottled water or some of those things. Consumers are looking for something a little bit more than just potable water that comes into their house. They want their water to be a little bit better.
No, let's talk about that. It's potable water. We just assume potable water is clean water.
Right.
What we don't know, once again, is what's in the water. We know it's potable, so it is, by theory, healthy enough for us to drink. But in different areas, I've noticed there's smell in the water that comes in the city water. And then my mind goes off again to all the people that take medicine.
Yeah.
Everyone's
Pharmaceuticals.
Tylenol, you name it. I mean, there's many types of medicine on the market. It goes through our body. Our natural thing in our body is to get rid of waste, whether it's from the rear end or the front end. It goes down the drain and back to the lake. What they determined and didn't know what to do about is high levels of medicine back in the lake.
Pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
Because potable water isn't about filtering or cleaning that water. How the hell this becomes, in my mind, whether or not it's true, and I'm going to assume it is true, because there's detections of medicine in the lake. How do you clean that friggin' water?
Well, it's not economically feasible for them to do it at a municipal level. So we as citizens need to take that into, take control and ownership of our own water that comes into our house that we consume for us and our family. And that's where guys like Dan and I come in. So if there is something that's naturally occurring that isn't filtered out by the municipality, that you've decided that, you don't want to, roll the dice, or you don't want to have in your water, that you have a higher standard, that's when you reach out to a company like us to have one of us come to your house, test your water, figure out what it is that you do and don't like about it, and make those changes so that we can get something that's pleasing to you, that you feel better about using when you drink, when you cook, when you wash, when you bathe, when you shower, no matter what you use your water for. If you're watering your ice rink, if you're watering your lawn, whatever. We just want to make the water that comes into your home that you and your family use better.
How much does it cost for a standard water test? And when I say standard, I'm talking about a complete water test.
So what we've done here is a standard water sample that we would do as a company to come in and do a sort of a baseline test to make sure we're testing for the common ones that I've talked before. That's usually done by a dealership at no charge as part of the sales process. If something like a higher level of TDS was found that didn't calculate out to the hardness or other things we've tested, it might be advisable at that point to go to a third party for an analysis. That at that point can cost a couple of $100, 100 and change, 200 and change.
Chump change. To know
For
about
the long
health
term,
of your
right,
family.
for the
and
long
when it
term.
comes to water, to me, that's chump change.
Sure. Well, and
So-
it might be completely necessary if we're talking about, for example, if your TDS stayed at 1500, right? And if we found that the hardness didn't equal that out, we could only account for maybe half of those dissolved solids. I would want to test further to find out what we're dealing with to better form an opinion on what equipment to choose for your home.
Okay, here's what I'm hearing.
So, sorry, Dan, I
please
didn't
don't.
mean, yeah, so we talked about two different things though. So on a city water, it's a lot easier for, first of all, any reputable company who sells water treatment equipment will come to your home and will give you a water test free of charge. It's a lot easier for anybody who sells water treatment equipment to do a test on municipal water. When we go out to somebody who has their own private well or their own private source, as Dan said, sometimes the initial testing, some of the results that are indicated in the initial test require us to do further testing. That's when there may be a charge for the consumer, if we have to send that to a third party for analyzation. But any reputable company who sells water treatment equipment to you can do the initial analysis for you and should do it free of charge. So if somebody's out there charging you to come out and do a water test like the one that we did, you know, you can look for somebody else out there maybe that would go out there and do that for you.
Okay, so that's good news. No matter what, if you're on well water, we really want to check the water in complete detail, not just a quick check, but a quick check at least can lead you to, you really should look further into the water.
Correct.
So that's a no-brainer. And there's many places, even government offices, that you can take your well water, put it in a water bottle, a safe glass container would be smarter, bring it in and they'll test it for nothing.
Right.
The stores that you own, other stores that are out there will test that water and at least tell you give you the advice you need. Mm-hmm. But I'm also hearing that city water should also be tested and checked for peace of mind.
Yeah. Well, distribution systems are old. You know, so for example, I grew up in Hamilton, which is an old city, and at one point I owned a house that was over 80 years old, and that house had lead pipes, and a lot of that neighborhood had lead pipes. So, you know, being the father of young children, and, you know, even the pencils that are in the school have switched from lead to graphite. You know, we don't want lead in our body, and I believe when I was a kid, it was something like 10 parts per million was an acceptable amount. Now I think it's like 0.01 parts per million.
Well, I think they determined lead should not be in our system.
At all.
It was in the paints when kids were playing. You know, kids put everything in their mouth. They take the paint that peels off the windows, they chew on it for a minute. If it contains lead, it's really, really bad for our kids, which is why I keep saying if it's an old home, you buy that little kit that you can do a lead test. It'll tell you right out whether or not there's lead in the paint. Things that we need to know.
The individual test would tell you, obviously, you've got your city water coming in and going through the distribution system and then ultimately in through your house from underground and in. But having a test done, you know, a lot of the municipalities, you can even go online and on their municipal sites, they will give you a breakdown of what has been tested for, the frequency they've done those tests, and that is publicized. What you can do is your own in-home testing to make sure that you're comparable.
That's a great point. That makes me wonder something here. Is there just the importance, like a well, bacteria is what they're looking for, you know, we talked about it, whether it's E. coli or that other name that you called it.
Coliform.
Bad stuff in the water. Is there just, for the city, when they show this test, do they test for everything or do they just test for what they need to?
I believe there would be a test for what they need to, not just bacterias, but there is a certain amount of other minerals and metals testing done as well.
Okay. This is pretty simple. Test your water. Test your water. Know what's in your water. Because I'll tell you, man, 15 years, I've been showering in the frickin' well. I've been brushing my teeth in the well. I've been consuming what I see in my pipes for all these years, and I don't know what it's done to me. I'm still here. I can only assume it wasn't great. It can't be great, because if I got to break it off my drain pipes.
Let's say it can be better. We can make it better.
Our body filters the water we drink, filters the food we eat. From the food, it pulls the nutrients out. There's the incredible science of the human body, and takes the nutrients, takes what it needs, and then we waste off whatever else is there. But if we're introducing not the greatest water, not the greatest food, it's going to have trouble breaking it up, and it can cause more problems. Isn't the kidneys a filtering system? So the water I was drinking, could it affect my kidneys drinking really high levels of TDS?
A lot of those can be to the individual as well. We talk about softening. Softening removes calcium and magnesium, but reintroduces sodium and chloride. So the higher level of hardness in your water, the more sodium and chloride will be left in your drinking water. This is why we stress the importance of a reverse osmosis after softening to remove any sodium and chloride, especially for people who are on sodium restricted diets.
Okay, so what you're saying, just so everyone understands this, it's usually that little tap beside the sink that runs between the three little cylinders, RO, reverse osmosis, for drinking water.
Correct.
For your kettle. One thing I've learned is the RO water for my kettle has kept it clean. And that was always a visual indicator to me to see that, because I just opened up the tap, filled it up, boiled, and before I knew it, it was so white, it was ridiculous, to the point where I actually poured from it, but it looked like the cloudiest water I've ever seen into my coffee. And my mind's going, it's okay, you're a contractor, you can drink this.
Well, think about a kettle. You've heard of the method of filtration called distillation? A distiller?
Yes.
Basically, a water distiller boils water. What a distiller does is it boils water, but it condenses the steam. The steam is the purified water that we collect and use. What's left in the bottom are all of the dissolved solids, the heavy metals, the minerals, and such.
Hence all the white.
Hence all of the white. Right.
Like I was caking it off. I could literally scrape it and pull out white chunks.
When you're boiling your kettle, what you actually want is coming out of the spout.
Is that right? That's the best water.
This is why we want to treat it before it gets to your kettle.
Okay. So here's also what I got. There's so many different water bottle companies out there because they're making a crap load of money off it, and they're making more than gasoline
Like your
companies
friend.
are and oil companies. Fine, I get it. Some of those bottled waters are RO, reverse osmosis.
Some of them are.
So we need to, as consumers, find out which ones they are, because that's the bottled water we should be drinking, yes?
It's the preferred for anyone who is used to that type of water or who truly wants a better quality. Other types of bottled water on the market are simply brought out of the ground from an aquifer or from a naturally occurring source. They are
Some might
filtered
be municipal water from another city that's been bottled.
They're treated for bacteria, they're treated for sediment and things like that. Sometimes other things are added to the water, like fluoride or salts for flavor. Ozone is added sometimes, and a lot of the time for sterility and to maintain shelf life of the bottle. But again, that some of these could be upwards of 400 or 500 TDS, or like we saw, even higher.
Things we didn't know. How many times do I say it? I don't see what's in the air. You don't see what's in the air, but I can tell you what's in the air. We don't see what's in the water unless we visually look at our toilet tank and it starts to show signs, or your sink, which shows signs of Klingons, whether it's dark, red, yellow, you name it. But you guys can explain to people what's in the water.
We can tell you what's in there.
And we need to know more about it.
This is all about awareness. This is all about awareness. We have to create the awareness before we can start implementing all of the solutions, right, and getting them out there in quantity and in bulk.
Well, I'm going to agree, because years ago we didn't know enough, and people were dying off, and I guess it was just classified as cancer. They have cancer. They're of old age. They died. Did they have proper water filtration systems in their house? Did they have water runoff from a farm field and all the cows' poo came in and caused contamination in the well water? I can go on and on and on. But we didn't know these things, and it causes life changes, especially in a long term of being in that environment. Short term can be bacteria, E. coli. That's quick and easy, and that's easily identifiable because you're going to be sick. Long term, I think, is the really big key here for me, because the more that I realized I was drinking raw water and I could see what it was doing to the plumbing in my house, I started to think about, and that's why I did the drilled well, what has this been doing to my body? I still don't know. Doesn't mean that it's done anything, but I'm sure positive it wasn't great. And one thing about your body is it can clean itself after a while, whether you smoke or it doesn't matter. Mother Nature's incredible at cleaning your body. The point is, don't add any more to it.
We want to give our body the healthiest environment we want our body to be the healthiest environment that we can make it, and it's all about what we put in our body, right? So.
Agreed. Okay, Mike, so what are some of the things we can do when it comes to, how do we do this when it comes to letting people know what the water is in their home?
Well, you guys talked a little bit about it earlier, and I think we talked a little bit about one of the issues that the housing market is causing right now, with a bunch of people waiving their right to an inspection prior to purchase because things are so competitive right now in that industry. Not only what we talked about earlier about not having a test done, you may have some E. coli or some type of
Contaminant in the water.
Some type of contaminant in the water. But if you're purchasing a residence that has a type of well that requires filtration equipment, without an inspection, you don't know if the house you're buying's filtration equipment is up to speed, is current, is filtering out what is in the water.
Is it working properly?
Is it working properly? A lot of our dealers, like Dan, partner with home inspectors, because from our experience, a lot of home inspectors do a very good job, but when they get to the basement, a lot of them aren't very familiar with our water treatment equipment. They don't know what it does, they don't know how it works, or if it's working. But if I was someone buying a house, much like wanting to know that the furnace in there is going to work for a few years, or that the roof doesn't have any holes, I'd also want to know if the filtration equipment that property needs works when I buy it. Otherwise, I want the guy to replace it, or I want a reduction in price on the offer that I would have made.
So I've got a wonderful system in my house, and I find out that it's clogged, and it's because probably high TDS levels. It's not going through the brine.
The regeneration cycle.
The regeneration cycle, so it's not really softening the water anymore.
Yeah, and you noticed that because your comment was the salt's not going down.
The salt's not going down. Why? Because
didn't
you
have to add
told me I
salt.
was going to be going through salt galore.
Correct.
Okay, so hence your point that your equipment may not be working properly.
Right.
Or sized properly. Maybe the weekend warrior did go to the big box store, buy that piece of equipment, and it looks great in the basement right now. But is it the proper piece of equipment for that home?
Because you mentioned you should have a professional, and that it's not the kind of thing that you want to just go to a DIY store, purchase yourself and attempt. But the reality is that a lot of people do that annually. And amongst the DIY stores, this is one of the most frequently returned products is a water softener, because Joe gets home, realizes he doesn't have the tools perhaps necessary to cut into his plumbing distribution system and connect all of what's necessary to connect a water softener, and therefore aborts and returns the product, and then calls one of us, or worse, calls Dan and asks to install that product that he bought at the DIY store.
It makes sense to me. I mean, I thought I could install my own water softener years ago. One of the first houses I bought, I thought, I'm just going to go buy one and install it, which I did.
Yeah.
But I didn't know what the hell it was doing, whether or not it was actually doing something. Odds are it was doing something,
Right.
but was it doing enough?
Well, how do you even know what you need? I mean, if you're just deciding yourself to go to a DIY store, purchase a softener, put it in, you've missed the first most important step in the process, which was what we did earlier, which was testing your water. You don't even know if the product that you're purchasing off of the shelf in the store will solve the issue that you're having at your residence. You shouldn't even do that if you live in the city yourself. You definitely shouldn't do it if you live on a rural property and have your own well. You really want to have somebody come out there and test that water for you.
It could be something as simple as the softener advertising that it will remove iron, and up to a certain amount of iron. What people don't realize is there's different types of iron in water. And if the iron is ferric or ferrous or bacterial or colloidal, that softener will only really be effective against maybe one, and with an additional filter, maybe two of those.
Okay, which leads me to a question. Obviously, don't mess with your own water. What we don't know can hurt us. So that saying isn't so true.
And cost us money.
I'm hearing the importance that I think every single home needs at least a filter on their system. Agreed?
From our standpoint, 100% yes.
100%.
I agree with
A
that.
no-brainer.
I would say that every single home in North America could be improved by having water filtration in the residence.
Simple as that. We buy fridges, and these fridges, which I love nowadays, come with the water, the ice machine, and the water, and it goes through a 3-stage filtering system, if I'm right.
Not even that. One stage.
Well,
in most cases.
the fridge I bought goes through the 3.
Okay.
So it is like a reverse osmosis, correct? It's
No,
not.
it is not. So let's get into that real quick. The difference between filtration and reverse osmosis. These are the different types of methods of drinking water treatment. Filtration would be just a single pass where we're taking the water, passing it through either sediment, it could be carbon, whether granular or block, but at the end, we're probably left with the same TDS level, that dissolved solids we were talking about. We may have just filtered out some sediment, we may have just filtered out some tastes and odors, chlorine, the popular one with carbon. But reverse osmosis is a different technology. We're literally taking that water and passing it through a membrane. Membrane is a semi-permeable device that allows the water to pass through it while the contaminants gets trapped on its layer and flushed down the drain. The good water is then passed for us to consume later. Think of it as a one-lane highway being divided into two, okay?
The filtered water goes into a storage tank where it sits and is held until you open the tap and call for it. Goes out of the storage tank through a post filter to freshen it up before it's administered through the tap, so that you're not drinking water that was sitting in a tank for a period of time before you ingest it.
And all ROs are not created equal, just like anything on the market. So
Who would have known that water was such a sophisticated thing? Even I didn't.
yeah,
There's
well,
no life without water.
Well, that we know. I mean, what happens to the grass if it doesn't get watered? It dies.
I
Happening
don't have
on
to know what
Mars.
is on it.
Okay,
I
look
don't
at
have to mow it as often.
We're going to be doing more of this. So we're going to be installing the most sophisticated Kinetico system in my house that is going to make sure that I'm healthy, I'm clean. My house is as healthy as and clean as it can be, and I'm talking about the plumbing or the distribution of water to my house and through my house, and including drains. We're going to videotape this. We're going to talk more about this. And by the end of this, all I'm telling everyone right now is
Get your water tested.
get your water tested. It's really as simple as that. Find out what you need in your home for healthiness for you and your kids. And don't just rely on bottled water. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
You're freaking awesome.
Happy to.
Thanks,
You
Dave.
really are awesome. They're saving me. This episode is brought to you by Improve Canada, Canada's largest home improvement center. Check out improvecanada.com. If you like the show, check out the episode page on makeitright.ca for more tips.